Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Welcome to another episode of Music Connects People. This is your host, Tom Jennings. This week I'm proud to present a conversation with author and musician Ken Sharp. Ken has written numerous books about a variety of artists, including Kiss, Cheap Trick, and Todd Rundgren, a name that will come up prominently during our conversation. In this episode, instead of focusing on other artists, we'll be focusing on Ken's music and his newest album, Beauty in the Backseat.
All right. Hey, really excited to have Ken Sharp on the phone with me today. And Ken, let me just first of all talk about your new album, Beauty in the Backseat. It's, great songs, amazing cover. I just love this album a lot. And you'd originally reached out to me to cover it, and I think you can appreciate, as many music writers do, that we get inundated with all these different copies of now it's downloads. It used to be CDs that we would somehow, hopefully find time to listen to and review. And I kind of messed up and wasn't able to review it, so I said, hey, let's have a quick conversation and put this on Music Connects People. So I guess to start out with, can you maybe, for somebody who's uninitiated with your music, and then we'll talk about your journalism career as well later, what was the driving force for you recording this album, and what's it about? What would you like people to know about it?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Tom. I've been doing music for a long time. Beauty in the Backseat is my fifth album, actually, and I stopped recording and even writing, a few years ago, because I kind of thought, no one really, what's the point? No one really cares. And I was doing an interview for a power pop movie. Actually, Todd Rundgren was interviewed for it too. I think maybe about a year later or something for it. And I did the interview at a studio by a guy named Fernando Perdomo, who's an amazing songwriter, producer, musician, kind of guy who can do it all, and a huge Todd Rundgren Utopia fan, so that always helps. And I walked in, and there were all these cool albums on the wall and all these great instruments. One of the albums on the wall was the Utopia 1982 self-titled, and my eyes lit up with that. And it felt like a really cool place, and I thought, let me at least for fun do a song, and I pulled out a song I had for a little bit. It was a ballad, and I recorded that, and it was just it kind of hit me like a lightning bolt. It was just like, this is kind of what I really need to be doing, in addition to trying to make a living, in terms of to fulfill my creative soul. That's the reason to do it. It's you hope what you do will catch on to other people, but it was just the joy of rediscovery. And now I'm like full-fledged back into it and, continually recording. So Beauty in the Backseat, to make a long story, hopefully a little shorter, is just a culmination of some of the songs that I've been recording, since then with Fernando Perdomo. And the prior record that I recorded with him, my first record for a while, was called New Morning, and it's MOURNING. So it was a very downbeat album with some upbeat music, but this record I kind of really wanted to steer it in the opposite direction, and to me it's kind of a tribute to the 70s music I grew up with, along with a lot of the Philly soul that is such a part of me. I'm from Philadelphia, so that always comes out, and certainly Todd and Utopia are a huge part of what I do and continue to do. Todd's such a huge influence on me as a writer as well. So yeah, that's kind of a little longer version than you probably wanted, but yeah, I'm certainly re-engaged with it to a major extent, and I'm doing it for my own creative soul.
and certainly, I mean, it's great stuff there, obviously, but I think what's interesting in your case that maybe is unique is that you've been on the other side. You've been where I am, where you're receiving copies of albums to review, and you're, as a music writer, somebody that's written columns and books about all these different artists. I mean, you know the struggle of trying to get music out, and as much as that must be frustrating, it must be fulfilling when you hit anybody that listens to it and says, "Hey, man, this is a great album."
Yeah, it is, and if I'm known for anything, it's certainly more for music writing and some of the books I've done. But to be honest, long before that, I've been playing and writing songs, and so that was always something that was happening even prior to getting involved on a more professional level, doing these type of things. So it's kind of an interesting full circle thing. I feel much more comfortable in your seat, doing interviews with people like that and things. But when it's my music, I certainly don't mind, because it's about me. Where when I'm interviewing someone else, it's really shining the spotlight on them, which is cool. But for me, with the music, it's my own personal DNA coming through. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting perspective to be on the other end of it, and I certainly understand the challenges that are inherent in today's climate to get your music out there and to get it accepted. But yeah, I've been really pleased. This record has landed on a lot of top album of the year lists, a lot of the different music sites, and I was nominated for 2 LA Music Critic Awards, which really blew me away. That was really, really cool. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how it's been received, and I'm continuing to record with Fernando and hoping to have another record out this year. I'm not getting any younger, so I can't really wait too long in between records. I can't wait years like I used to do. I kind of need to, if I'm going to do it at all, I kind of need to be very proactive.
So, I mean, what are the things that you're doing to kind of, foster this a fan base, so to speak? And I say that because you and I, we're both Todd Rundgren and Utopia fans. I mean, I think most of my musical roads lead back to them. You're a big Kiss fan as well, from what I understand, and those are 2 of the most amazing fan communities, I think, in music. I mean, they're both very dedicated. They're both very loyal. They're both very kind of in tune to what the band is doing. And I hate to use the term cult because I think cult has a religious connotation, but they are kind of cult-like in their love of their bands. I mean, have you learned anything from being one of those fan members that maybe has translated into pushing out the album?
No, I don't think so. And what's ironic is, I grew up, digging Kiss, and obviously everything from the Beatles to Hall & Oates to Elvis is my biggest, Elvis Presley is my biggest hero, and Philly Soul and Stevie Wonder, and just so much stuff. I love the band. But it's ironic that I don't think anything that I'm writing sounds like Kiss songs. You know what I mean? But I'm probably best known to people with books probably in that world, or the power pop world with a bunch of the power pop books I've done as well. So in terms of trying to reach people, I certainly try to reach some of those people in those areas that are familiar with my work and that I think would dig what I'm doing, especially the power pop audience. I try to reach them directly. The Kiss audience is a tougher sell because the music I'm doing is not really things that kind of fit within that. Although there's a song on my album, the first song on the album called Rock Show, where I was lucky enough to get Ace Frehley to lay down a solo. We needed something, like that had a lot of swagger, for the type of song. And what's funny is, he laid down a really cool solo, and we went down. I can tell you the story later if you want me to. We recorded it solo at his house in San Diego. But what's funny is, and what I especially get a kick out of is the song is not a hard rock song. The song is very much a Philly soul. To me, it's like a Smokey Robinson Motown song, with some heavy guitars on it. So it's kind of neat to be able to bridge those 2 worlds. My love of Kiss growing up, and probably certainly my greater love is of that Philly soul and Motown and that soul pop type of stuff. But
big time dreams and power chords. It's alright, we got it under control. One more rehearsal, then it's all we show. Curtain call, now we're ready to roll. Gonna put on a rock show. It's the glorious sound, and it's all going down at our rock show. Where the music is loud, you're a part of the crowd. Got your tickets in hand, all the boys in the band. They wanna thank you for coming to our rock show. Step right up, we're on this soon.
but yeah, it's extremely hard to grab a hold of an audience, especially today. There's so many outlets and so many people trying to like you said, trying to get your interest, and the fact that a lot of people now can record at home, and that avenue is much more open to people. There's a lot more people doing it, so it's even more competitive. So yeah, I mean, that's the continual challenge, is how do you broaden what you're doing beyond a few hundred people?
Yeah, and let's circle back to Rock Show, because it was one of the 4 songs that I wanted to offer a quick clip of and kind of talk about. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, it definitely isn't a rock song like you think of Paul McCartney's Rock Show, which is really kind of in your face. But I tell you, I think what makes this song work, at least on my end, is that it's something you can really relate to. And I think anybody that grew up in maybe the 70s or 80s, or should we say came of age musically, can relate to that song as far as just the real excitement of having that ticket to the concert and going to the show. Is that the emotion that you were trying to catch? Because that's what I pulled out of that song.
Yeah, exactly. I remember working on the music on my Wurlitzer and figuring out what I'm going to write about, and I think the word Rock Show came out, and I said, well, there is a Paul McCartney song, which is great, the Paul McCartney and Wings song, Rock Show, but, this is nothing like it. And there's obviously lots of songs with similar titles and things like that. But yeah, I wanted to write something about that excitement of a band getting out on the road, and maybe not a huge band, but just the joy of, having an audience and playing a sold out place, even if it doesn't have to be Madison Square Garden, and just that great joy of experiencing a rock show from being a member of a band.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it really, I don't know, it's one of those experiences that I think, I'm a live music junkie, and the only reason I became a writer was because I couldn't afford to pay for concert tickets anymore. I had to figure out an angle to get free tickets, and it's kind of worked for me on some level, but you feel bad having to take freebies when a lot of these artists don't always have the money to hand out free concert tickets, but at least you get them the publicity in the long run. And next song we'll talk about is I Want to Be David Cassidy. I interviewed David not too long before he passed, and he's just a very interesting sort of complex character. And I had sort of forgotten about him from when I was a kid. I mean, when I was a kid, loved the Partridge Family, and he was this is a guy that was playing stadiums and almost had a Beatles type experience where he couldn't really get around anything. And then near the end of his career, he was playing these small theaters. So I don't know. Maybe you could talk about your thoughts about David, and I always felt like as a young male, it was kind of hard to like David because he was such a heartthrob, if that makes any sense. But he sang some amazing songs, and he really was a great performer.
For me, since I was a kid, I loved him on the Partridge Family and loved his solo albums, and he was always kind of like, wow, I want to be him. I want to be that cool guy who looks great. The chicks love him. He's singing these really, really great melodic pop songs, and what's not to love? It was funny. There was a review of my album recently by a writer named Keith Creighton, who kind of talked about how, this album, like this guy should have had his own Croft Super Show and had his own lunchbox and kind of been like a David Cassidy thing. I'm like, oh, that would have been great, been on Tiger Beat and things like that. But, my music, I do a lot of different things, so it's not just that real poppy stuff. But, I love that, and that's a big part of what I do. But yeah, David, for me, has always been someone who I've loved since, growing up, and had a chance to see him live many times, and I actually became friends with him, and I worked on his book, Could It Be Forever? I'm not credited, but I did all the interviews with him for it and his family and a lot of the people that worked on his albums. I flew down and spent a few days with him at his home in Fort Lauderdale. This was in, I think, 2005. And I've always been a champion of his. I co-wrote some Partridge Family liner notes for some Partridge Family CDs with a great pop culture writer named Lisa Sutton. She's also a graphic designer. And ironically, I got a chance to open for David. It was the third to last show he ever did. And I saw him backstage before he gave me a big hug. It was a good reunion, but that was the show where it was kind of shaky. It was at the Canyon Club in Agoura Hills, California, and it was really kind of shaky. And it was really such a great experience to have a chance to open for a hero of mine, an idol of mine, and I played a song from Beauty in the Backseat, wasn't out at that point, called 24 Hours a Day, which was actually written, inspired by a song on the Partridge Family Sound magazine that has that same title. And I was like, I love that title. Let me see if I could write something. It's a very poppy song. So it was this, he played one more show after that in Santa Barbara, and then shortly after that in New York City, and that was it. And then I got the news that, months later, that he passed away, and it hit me so hard, and I felt, I have to do something beyond, let me see if I could try to write a song about it. And I did, and we turned it around really quickly. I recorded it with Fernando Perdomo and my good friend Rob Unfilia, who's an artist, and we recorded it, in a day, pitched it to Sirius XM radio. They liked it enough. We mixed it on a Saturday, and it was on the radio nationwide on Rodney Bingenheimer's show on a Sunday. So, and that song has gotten a lot of great reaction. I did a vinyl single, and it was just really kind of a tribute to the spirit of who he was, and who I kind of wanted to be, and someone who I really think was certainly underrated, especially as a singer too. Such an incredible singer, and was kind of pegged at that teen idol, but there was so much more to him.
I wanna be David Cassidy and be a #1 crush. I wanna be David Cassidy and ride on that Partridge Family bus. Join your fan club for $1.49. I played your records and sang along with every line. On the cover of a Tiger Beat, you'll have them dancing in the street. I wanna be David Cassidy and be a #1 crush. I wanna be David Cassidy.
Yeah, it was an interview that I will never forget. I mean, it was almost haunting, because I think when he first got on the phone, he was, and I've posted it on another one of my podcasts, you could sort of sense that there's a bit of, trepidation, as far as he just didn't want to have to answer the same old Partridge Family questions. But near the end, we talked about his mom, not his TV mom or stepmom, the same person, Shirley Jones, but his mom. And he really got quite emotional, because she was dealing with, I believe, Alzheimer's, dementia near the end of her life as well, and it was very difficult. And then to think that he wound up going through the same thing, I don't know. That was one that really struck me. I mean, it just really struck me at how, I guess he kind of, like you said, he comes off as this larger than life team heartthrob who seemed to have it all, but at the end of the day, tragedy besets everyone.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, he's sadly kind of a tragic figure near the end of his life, with making a lot of choices. The last words he said before he passed away was so much wasted time, and I think obviously it hit him then that there were a lot of things that he could have done, and I'm not judging, because I love him, and everyone has flaws and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it was sad for me to see that he never really could embrace the love that people had for him. And he could, but there was always that darkness and that sense of, you know, people didn't accept me for who I was, but he brought so much joy to so many people. And I know he felt it, but I don't know if he felt it as deeply as he probably should have, because if you affect people in this life, and so many people like he did, with such a positivity and a lot of happiness, then you really led a really good life. And I just feel sad that I don't know if he ever really absorbed that as complete as I wish he did, and I'm sure other fans wish he did.
Yeah, I mean, very well said. I agree. And, you know, not to get too morose, we seem to be talking about the dead rock stars now. David Bowie died. I mean, that's, you know, fascinating, kind of a different situation. I mean, David was always kind of a larger-than-life figure who seemed to do well and kind of passed on his own terms. But I think maybe fans of, you know, the kind of thing that David Bowie or Prince, or even, you know, many years before Frank Zappa, you know, those guys were doing in the music industry, were really impacted by that death, because we didn't really see it coming. There wasn't a whole ton of media reports that he was sick, although I think I spoke to one of his players that said they knew he was sick, but I couldn't publish it at the time. And of course, even, you know, back to Todd Rundgren, which we always seem to find our way there, even Todd's White Knight album was due in large part to the fact that a lot of these types of guys were sort of disappearing, and we don't really have anybody to take their place.
Yeah, you know, well, the David Bowie one, it's interesting, is the first concert. I've always been a huge Bowie fan, and the first concert I ever saw was seeing him on the Station to Station tour at the Spectrum in Philadelphia in March of '76. I'll never forget it. It was absolutely amazing. And so he's always been, a big influence of mine. But that song wasn't written specifically right after he died. I just remember working on a song on the keyboards, and somehow, you know, some words started coming out that I was like, oh, maybe this is about Bowie, and then it kind of worked out that way, where I was kind of, you know, obviously I was extremely gobsmacked to wake up one morning and just see that he was gone.
Breaking news. David Bowie, rock legend, has died at the age of 60.
I still remember when you fell down on earth and became the star of my whole universe. And I won't forget. I still regret. David Bowie died. David Bowie died. David Bowie died. David Bowie died.
Todd is similar to Bowie in the sense that they were constantly, you know, musical chameleons that never really stayed in one place, and Todd really loved Bowie too, ironically. And, you know, he recently took part, as you know, in, you know, the Bowie tribute shows, I think overseas and things. I guess it was in
Iceland, I think, if I remember.
Yeah, exactly. I have a friend who went there too, ironically, and said it was amazing. So, and I know Todd went to see Bowie. I think he saw him on the Ziggy tour at Radio City Music Hall. So I think he always really admired Bowie, and admired that about him. And it's a shame those two never worked together. Can you imagine? But maybe it would have been two guys with two forceful personalities and egos and ways of wanting to do things that maybe it wouldn't have worked. But it's certainly an interesting thing to dream about. But yeah, Bowie is certainly one of my biggest musical influences, and that song was a way to pay tribute to him.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting to talk about the two of them working together. I was just listening to a B.B. Buell interview where she had spent some time with David, and I think she was still with Todd at the time, so maybe that would have been something that could have caused an issue. I don't know. I mean, it's only conjecture, and certainly I don't want to spread gossip. But yeah, I mean, she had spoken about it as well. But I also agree on the other fan, just from a like musical perspective, putting two guys of that stature in the room together would be pretty scary. But you know, Todd recently worked with Donald Fagen, who's kind of a larger than life character, at least in my mind, and I thought they came up with a great thing.
And by the way, I think that track is the best Steely Dan song I've heard for many years. Like, because I love Steely Dan, but I think for me the problems with the last few Steely Dan studio albums were they didn't really have these great melodies that a lot of the 70s stuff had. You know, they had these beautiful, intricate melodies, things that were certainly a bit catchier, and and that seemed to be lacking for me. So when I heard that song, I was like, wow, that's exactly what I wish some of the reunited Steely Dan studio music sounded like, because it had much more of a memorable melody. But yeah, boy, to have those two work together is amazing. I mean, what's great about that record is for me, the song "Let's Do This" that he wrote with the Jen from Pursuit of Happiness is that to me was, if Utopia had reunited, and that would have been the song that I would have thought would have come out of them, that type of a song. And that to me was like, wow, this is like a new Utopia song. And I remember telling Todd that too, as well. But yeah, I mean, we could go on and on about how great Todd is. We both agree with that one.
Yeah, we definitely agree with that song too, because I mean, that's a song that, the Pursuit of Happiness is one of those bands that really had a great power pop sensibility, kind of along the lines of those bands that we grew up loving, like the Rundgrens, Utopias, and Raspberries, and all those types of bands. And I think that that was the song when I first got a review copy of the album that really jumped out at me, because I'm always looking for that one song, like Buffalo Grass was the one on One Long Year and all that other stuff. And I'm more of a Utopia fan than I am a Todd fan, and please folks don't send me hate emails, but I've always been more of a Utopia fan than a Todd fan. I think you and I have discussed that before, and I always look for that Utopia song, because I feel like even Kazim Sultan's solo work, I hear a lot of more Utopia songs than you do Todd songs, but Todd's not one to go back in the past, so we don't necessarily have to worry about it.
I think what's ironic is I think Mo Berg mainly did the music for that, and I think he was, in a way, trying to come up with something that maybe it wasn't specifically Utopia, or maybe it was the type of thing that he would have done in Utopia. You know what I mean? And then I think Todd, came up with the melody and the words as well. But yeah, if Utopia had done one song on the reunion tour and they said, here's a new song, we hadn't heard that song, I never would have thought that was not a collaboration between all the guys in Utopia.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's perfect.
Speaking of Todd Rundgren, which we always seem to get back to, let's wrap up with the last cut that we'll preview from the album, Philly Kind of Soul. And I don't know, I grew up near Buffalo and Rochester, New York, so I didn't grow up in Philadelphia, but for some reason I've just always been drawn to all the music that came out of that area. And I think for years the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was rightfully criticized for not really recognizing the importance of Philly soul and Philly music and everything that they contributed to pop culture. You had your Detroit with their recognition of Motown, and you're in LA, of course, that stuff that's come out of the LA music scene, but Philly has really just produced some amazing music. I mean, that's a great heritage to come from. I mean, what can you share about the song, the city, just anything having to do with, the music community in Philadelphia?
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is with a lot of my past work, in the power pop world, I've kind of tried to, kind of focus the material that I would be putting on records to fit perfectly within the power pop thing. And now I think, especially with this album and the last one to some extent, but this one especially, now it's just throwing caution to the wind, and it's just like, I'm just gonna, whatever comes out that feels good, and if it turns out to be a good song, it doesn't have to fit within the milieu or within the constraints of something. I mean, I love power pop, but Philly kind of soul is not, Philly Kind of Night.
Oh, sorry. It's really
it's
kind of
not. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting all the there's so many Philly songs, but Philly Kind of Night. But growing up in Philly and hearing that music, on AM radio, whether it was Todd, whether it was Hall & Oates, whether it was the Spinners, the Stylistics, the OJs, and obviously in hearing a lot of Motown and Smokey and Stevie and all that type of stuff, such a big part of my heritage and my DNA, and it really came out. And on that song, I was so extremely honored to have John Oates of Hall & Oates, like huge heroes of mine, that he sang background vocals on that song. I mean, nothing, and I thanked him so many times since then, but nothing could be more life affirming for me, for him to have done that for me. And he's such a good guy to have done that. And I mean, that song, is my tribute to the type of music I was hearing, especially on AM radio in the mid '70s. A really talented artist named Caitlin Wolfberg put the strings on there, and just to see it come alive in the studio was really, really great. It was mainly Fernando and I doing all the instruments on the track.
She's got a supersonic soul. Baby, she don't give a damn about rock and roll. And she keeps me up at night. Physical attraction of a chemical kind. It's gonna be a Philly kind of night. Philly kind of night. Can I be the light that shines on your darkest night? On your darkest night. Stay with me on your anger. I'll give you my heart. Supersonic soul.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance I'm going to do a music video for that one too. I did a music video for the single called "Lemons to Lemonade," which is another. It's one of my favorite songs on the record, but it's another kind of tip of the hat to that Philly sound. You know what I mean? Hall & Oates and Todd and all that type of stuff when they got soulful. Well, certainly when Todd got soulful, Hall & Oates, obviously, that was always a thread in their music. And so yeah, getting back to the song, it's a celebration of that collision of so many different styles that became the Philly sound, whether it was gospel, soul, pop, R&B. I mean, all the stuff that came into play to create that melting pot of the Philly sound. But yeah, there's no, I never want to run from it, and I'm really glad that now I feel more confident within myself to embrace it and allow it to come out in my music. And that's just one example. I mean, I have since then and since doing this record, there's a bunch of Philly inspired songs that I'll be including on records in the future.
Awesome. Well,
but
listen,
none with the word Philly in the title. Yeah.
we had to listen to enough Philly talk last year with the Super Bowl, so that's fine. And up here in Buffalo, we're just sick and tired of the Philly talk. So football fans. But listen, Ken, just wrap up by saying thank you so much. I do appreciate your patience and let me get back around to this album. And hopefully anybody listening out there, will put a link up in the show notes. You can order it through Amazon or iTunes or any of the major music outlets. And it's important to support artists as they put out material. There's a lot of work involved. Said you got some great guest stars. You mentioned Ace Frehley, John Oates. I think there's a guy named Chasm Sultan who I'm going to be speaking to in about 20 minutes. It's on there as well.
And that's the one I just briefly to say, Chasm, I wrote the song called Mona Lisa Smile, which to me, you talk about utopia, to me sounded like a song that could have been, or at least Fernando thought it is, a song that could have been on the 1982 album, which to me is like the holy grail, in utopia. But at least I was going for that type of vibe. It kind of came out, and I thought, wow, it has this kind of utopia vibe. And I asked Chasm, and what a gent he is, and I've known him for a long time, and he again was such a kind-hearted guy to show some mercy, and he sang on the choruses on that song. And for me to hear that track with his vocals on it was just, not like if someone said, here's a lot of money, or you could have that experience of Chasm singing on your record, or John Oates or Ace Frehley playing on your album. And I would always choose, the artist, that satisfaction, because that means a lot more. It doesn't help me pay the rent each month, but it certainly is fulfilling, the creative side of me, and that's and the appreciative side of me as well. So yeah, Chasm is just tops in my book.
Yeah, no, I agree. I couldn't agree more. It's funny. I sent him a song once. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago. He agreed to listen to it, which most artists won't. And please don't send him one if you're listening, because you shouldn't hound him, and I shouldn't have. But I did. It was really funny because he definitely listened to it. He just messaged me back and goes, "Needs a bridge." I was like, it's now my running joke amongst my friends that I literally do not know how to write a bridge in a song. So any song I've ever written just doesn't have a bridge. So maybe someday you and I will collaborate and you can find a bridge for a couple of my songs.
I'm good at writing bridges.
Well, that's great. Well, again,
that's
Ken.
Awesome. But Tom, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you supporting me and my record. And if people are interested in checking out, they could also go to my website, which is www.ken-sharp.com. And if they actually want to get the CD, and there are still some people who want CDs, with the lyrics and all that stuff, they can order it directly from me through that site.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Again, Ken, can't thank you enough. And hopefully one of these days we'll be either on the same coast or somewhere else where we can actually meet face to face. I know we've talked a couple of times.
That would be great.
That'd be excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ken.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks for listening to Music Connects People. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ken Sharp. And remember, check out the show notes for more information and for contact information if you have any questions. Until next time, this is your host, Tom Jennings, saying thank you very much for listening.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.